All right, welcome to Jedbanger's Ball. I'm your host, Jed Mayhew. Today's episode features my good buddy, Sean Hoffman. We're talking about scoring TV, film, video games, making music for those things, licensing them to them. Basically, being your own sort of music generator and coming up with ideas and songs that are then used for all sorts of TV shows that you see and video games and et cetera, et cetera. So I hope everybody had a good 4th of July weekend. Hope everybody was safe. I know here in LA it's crazy. It's like a war zone out there, so I'm sure it was fun. But yeah, let's get into my discussion here with Sean Hoffman. We actually did this one at his studio, so it's a little bit different than what we normally hear. But yeah, I hope you enjoy it. We just turned off the air conditioner so that we could hear ourselves talk here.
Now we are recording.
Okay, cool. So, Sean, explain where we are today, because it's a little bit different than normally when I do this show.
We're in a one-car garage in Echo Park. I think it was built in 1927.
It's your house, though. It
is my house, and it is a one-car garage. It was a tool shed when I got the place. I found a dead possum in here.
We found a dead raccoon when we moved in. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign.
It is. It's a great sign.
It's a good sign. Okay. But you built this place, though. This is your studio, we should say.
Yes, my dad and I built this, and it actually was if you look around, you see all the mistakes of learning how to do carpentry as you go. But we built this whole thing, and man, I've gotten a lot of use out of it, and I really loved it. It's really small. You've been here before, and like everybody's bumping into each other, but that's the way it goes in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, you wouldn't put like a full band in here.
I have. It was really uncomfortable. I have. But, I do what I can. Sometimes I've actually done it in my living room, too. It's just a pain in the butt breaking down all the gear that you see and moving it. But we're lucky to have any space in this city. It's just tough, It's so valuable.
So, I mean, what made you think, what made you decide to build a studio in the house or whatever?
Well, when I first moved to town, to Los Angeles in the late 90s, the scene wasn't incredibly active at that point, so I was more drawn to working in television with music. So the first thing I learned is that you needed to get a rig together, and when I was at school, I saw the earliest versions of digital home recording rigs, and I started building one, and I have some pieces from the beginning of when I started, but that's how it all started. So I knew that I always needed a space to be able to keep some music stuff, and I used to rent office space around Los Angeles when it was inexpensive, and luckily one day I was able to buy a house, and I was able to build this out, and now I have my own space. So
I'm trying to remember how you and I met. Was it in CB Brand? We were playing in a country band together.
Needed a last-minute fill-in, and
that was you.
Yeah, and I learned the set the night before, and then I came and practiced with you guys, which is typical of CB Brand.
And you were better than everybody else in the band who had been playing the songs for years.
I don't know about all that, but it was one of those gigs that I'm glad I did, because I would never have met this great group of guys, and it was through Adam. Adam was the one that had suggested. I think a guitar player couldn't make it. It was probably Dave Bain or somebody couldn't make it.
Right. Our friend Adam Wade, who I think we've mentioned him on the show before, who played in Jawbox and Shudder to Think.
And that Chris Novoselic band with the girl singer. You remember that one?
Chris Novoselic, is that it?
Is that Novoselic?
Oh, right.
How do you say his name from Nirvana bass
they always
player,
spelled
dude.
it wrong on all the Nirvana albums too. They thought that was hilarious to spell their names wrong.
Yeah, I don't even know what his real name is, but he had that band with the girl singer. You remember that?
Sweet 75?
Yeah, I believe that was it.
Was that what it was called?
He was in it. Adam was in that band.
I don't know if I ever heard that band. I remember hearing about them or whatever.
It was a departure from Nirvana, shall we say. So
I heard it wasn't that hot.
Yeah. I mean, I listened to a recording because Adam had posted a thing, and it was very different.
Did he record with them?
I believe he did. It was very different because she was kind of like a street folk singer. You know what I mean? Kind of like folk punk or something. It was.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'll have to get Adam on the show to explain. I don't want to talk about his band that he was in.
I don't know if he had a ton invested in it, but he was in it. So
well, you know, he's got quite the resume though. Yeah. So anyways, you and I met playing in a country band, our friend Chad's band, basically, we should say. I played a bunch of shows then, but then we started like making some music over here at this place that was for, I mean, also I should say we recorded the theme song for the podcast here.
We did the theme song here, which you were the Brian Wilson of the project. You came over and you just told us we made your dreams come alive. You forgot also, really the first big thing we did together was Supermarket Supergroup.
Oh yeah, our children's record. I forgot. I forgot all about that. We did a whole children's album together too, based on food and recipes.
We did a lot more than we ever imagined, from like funny voices to it was really
a lot of
kind
fun
amazing.
Times in this garage. A lot of fuck, I totally forgot about that. That's fucking
and hopefully we'll get to do one of your experimental zigzags records here.
Well, that's the plan. We'll see what happens with that. Caleb keeps sending me and I keep sending him just like really whacked out shit with like lots of chorus and delay on it, and then like they have titles like Chrissy's theme and Entering the Station, and they're like, you know, just our ideas for like movie soundtrack sort of, you know, songs that you would hear, scores.
Yeah,
our ideas for like scores that are for films that don't even exist yet.
That's what I'm here for.
So anyways, okay, so let's get back. So what were you doing like before all this though? You were playing in a band. You were playing in a pretty well-known band.
Well, see, I'll tell this as fast as possible. When I first got to town, I was working in commercial music, which I'm glad I did because it's always allowed me to live. Somewhere in the early 2000s, a girl I knew was dating the singer from a band called Bedroom Walls, and they were doing really well around town, and they needed a bass player. I filled in on bass, and when the bass player came back, I think she was doing merchandise or something for Beck, and when she came back and was able to play, they said, why don't you switch over to guitar, which is normally what I play. So I was in that band, and through them, that band kind of took off. It was around the same time like the Shins and stuff were taking off, and we were often mentioned with the Shins. But I met everybody through that band. It was really a good thing. It seems like every time that I say yes to something, it always opens up so many things for me. So I try to say yes more often now. But
that explains you coming to play with CB.
Yes, and you know, I really didn't want to do it. I had this horrible feeling had this horrible feeling in my stomach of learning 15 songs. You know, it's like, oh god, it's gonna be awful. But it ended up being really fun. Met another great group of guys. But through Bedroom Walls, I got into American Music Club, which, you know, it's a typical, if you know anything about American Music Club or Mark Heitzel, all the stories that you hear about all that all happened to me. So
right. And I don't know too much about it, but for people that don't know, I mean, what I did hear when I was working, you know, more in the music business or working at Sub Pop or whatever, was that Mark Heitzel's, you know, he's known as he's an eccentric character.
It's his trip, and he's you know, he's a personality,
right?
But it was fun, and I met a lot of people through that. But when I got back, and basically I was kicked out of the band because of, you know, a feud, shall we say. But when I got back, I realized that I needed to concentrate on doing some stuff that I was highly invested in. Now, I was an equal member of that band, but really someone else was sailing the ship, and there wasn't really that much say. Everything was split fair, so I have nothing but positive things to say from a business side, but I needed to do stuff that I was invested in artistically and not just someone else's trip.
But like, what are your influences musically? I mean, you're talking about bands that are kind of, I guess, indie rock or whatever, but I know you're like a metal dude too, and like you grew up in Texas, right? Like,
yeah, Virginia and Texas. Basically, I'm from Texas, but I'm a military kid, so I ended up back in Texas when my dad retired, and that was for my senior year. And yes, I was into metal, and metal also led to like just liking any sort of heavy guitar playing. So I found myself listening to all kinds of bizarre and bad bands just to hear a cool guitar solo. I don't know if you ever went through that phase, but it all started off with
sort of the Guitar Player magazine.
Yeah,
sort of phase
and you'd listen to any junk just to hear a cool guitar solo. You know,
it's like I Paul Gilbert comes to mind.
Yeah, and the guy, he's actually a pretty funny guy.
No, he's a super funny guy. I looked him up on YouTube, and like
the bands are a little hard to stomach. Racer X is it's a rough listen.
Yeah, it's tough to get into the. There's the songwriting is not the most. You can't really like sing along to it in your car.
No, well, you could, but it would sound like like after school special music or something. But you just waited for the guitar solo. But it all started probably like it did with you, the mixtapes of the '80s, where people would send around. I used to be in this little like punk rock trading group where we would all send a cassette, and you had to make a cassette and you send it to the next guy. And it came with the usual suspects on there: Cro-Mags, Exploited, mixed with lighter stuff like B-52s and Violent Femmes, typical kid stuff.
Right,
and it was rad. It was great. It was a great time. But that led into metal, and that's where you and I have where we share some likes. It was Metallica's Ride the Lightning. I actually heard that before Kill 'Em All, and Ride the Lightning was like face melting how great it was.
Yeah, I think I heard Master of Puppets first. That was because I got it in the in one of those Columbia House. You get like
I remember those
8 cassettes for a penny, and I got Master of Puppets, So Far So Good So What by Megadeth.
Yeah.
A Testament record.
Yeah, that would probably be either New Order or Practice What You Preach one. What was that one called? Was it called Practice What You Preach?
I can't remember what the Testament record was. I wasn't that thrilled by it at the time.
They were kind of cool, though, if you go back and listen.
They're cool now. I dig it now. But at the time, it didn't blow me away as much as those other ones did. And like Slayer, Megadeth, and then it was like Anthrax, like State of Euphoria or whatever, and what was the one where they cover
Anthrax had that. Okay, they had Fistful of Metal, which was one where he kind of sang on that one.
Yeah,
it was kind of like Pantera's Cowboys from Hell or whatever. When they would sing
falsetto.
Yeah, and then it went into more like yelling.
Right.
See, Among the Living.
Among the Living is, I think that's the one. Well, the one I had the. We're gonna just talk about Anthrax for now. Right now. The one that I had that I remember being really into was I brought "I'm the Man" by Anthrax to show and tell.
Public Enemy,
and also they did a cover of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath.
Yeah, that was a good version too.
Yeah, and that was the first time that I ever heard Black Sabbath, I think, was on that Anthrax cassette, because when I thought of Black Sabbath back then, I'm talking about, I was like 8 years old in 3rd grade here. When I thought of Black Sabbath back then, I thought it was like, Jimi Hendrix or Creedence Clear. Like I thought it was like old man classic rock or whatever.
It was. I heard Iron Man first, but I didn't realize the Sabbath was that heavy, because Iron Man didn't seem that heavy to me. But it's all relative. Back in the day, it was incredibly heavy. But I'd already heard Slayer and stuff. So
exactly,
it did seem like old man music. It's like when I finally heard Led Zeppelin, I was like, this sounds like hippie stuff.
I think we had this same conversation like 2 weeks ago, drunk in a kitchen with Rick Rodney of the band Strife, photographer. Yeah, where we were just like, I heard Misfits before Van Halen, so fuck Van Halen.
Yeah.
We could have those conversations all day long. But that's what you were listening to originally, was like that kind of music before you kind of got into,
6th grade was the big changing period for me. That's where I started like searching out my own music. Before that, it was kind of, I was a regular kid, just whatever was on the radio or your parents brought around. 6th grade, I made the stand. It's also when I started skateboarding, so you had this influence of other kids, and they also opened up your world. You weren't going to hear this stuff on
This
the
is
radio.
in San Antonio.
No, actually, this is in Germany.
Oh, okay.
Military, Frankfurt Air Base, and it was a bunch of great kids. It was skaters and metalheads, and
how are you finding this music? Just through cassettes, or?
I had a friend that was a trader. Chris Nolan was his name. I think he's a super Christian now, and anyways,
I think he directed Batman.
He did Batman. His dad was a record trader. He used to like get all these like Frank Zappa bootlegs and stuff, and he taught his kid that, and he had every metal record, and he had no filter. He would have everything from like Keel, which was like Ronnie Keel. I think he played played bass or something for Alice Cooper. He'd have like everything from like Keel to like LA Guns to Slayer to Celtic Frost to Agnostic Front. He was just a complete lover of heavy stuff.
Sure.
So he'd bring it around, and we would check it out, and if I liked it, I didn't like high screaming back then. I liked yelling more than I liked the high screaming, but I've come to like the high screaming now.
Sure. Well, I mean, you
King
have
Diamond
that
stuff,
Yeah, you have that. I didn't like that high screaming shit either at the time, and now I love like Merciful Fate, King Diamond and stuff. But everybody needs that kid, or like for a lot of people, it's like an older brother,
Yeah.
For me, it was like I grew up with all these like kids from Thailand, like their parents were from Thailand or from Laos or whatever, or Lao or whatever, and their older brothers were like huge metalheads, and they were like Thai kids with like really long hair, and then like custom like jeans with like Eddie, like Iron Maiden image on the jeans, and then like the shark gill like cut out Slayer shirt, like
you always wanted to be accepted by those guys because they just looked so cool, that it was hard to get the introduction.
Well, Southeast Asia is metal's huge there, and in music in general, but like they tend to go for like heavier stuff.
There's a guy on our base. His name was Eric Bonenstiel. He was John Bonenstiel's older brother, and he went on to be a metal critic. I see his name pop up every once in a while, but he was the guy that had the Slayer jacket back in 1985 or 86, right, somewhere around there. And
Bonenstiel?
If you look it up,
metal name.
Yeah. And he was the guy that like you always looked up to. You wanted, like, he was a man of few words, when you try to ask him about anything. But
yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, like metal, like this, we're talking a lot about metal now. We went out of your talking about you and talking about metal, but for me, like it was like what I first got into, and then I sort of just like got rid of it because I was like got into punk rock, and I was like, you can't listen to metal and like punk, and then I kind of went back full circle, and then when I realized like you can just listen to whatever the fuck you want,
it seemed like an evolution, right? At first you would listen to nothing but that because everything else just seemed so lame, but as you got older and you start to broaden your horizons, I got into all kinds of stuff. But I always look back at skateboarding and metal as a great foundation for starting life. So many creative people. And you know what? As I've talked about, I've always kind of returned to it. It's like, it was great,
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the only thing you should listen to.
No. But so when did you pick up guitar around this time when you were listening to this stuff?
Yeah, my parents were real funny about guitar. When I was over in Germany, everything was expensive and hard to get. So when I was over there, it's like, nope. I was asking for a guitar the whole time. When I got back to the States, I was in the suburbs of D.C. My dad was at the Pentagon. And the suburbs of D.C. are kind of like Marin County and up in San Francisco area.
What was your dad doing?
He was Air Force's consultant to Congress. That was his first job that I remember offhand. But Pentagon is just, you deal with Washington a lot. You're up in the kind of, you're barking the orders for the rest of the Air Force. But anyways, they had there's a lot of money up there, so the school districts are really nice, the public school districts, and the public school I went to.
The white ones are.
Yeah. But like on the Virginia side where we lived, it's just endless, suburbs and basketball goals and what have you. But anyways, they had a guitar ensemble program there, so I joined up, and the school gave you a Takamine acoustic guitar. They would assign you one. You could check it out. It was great. And I brought it home, and my dad saw me and starting to play that guitar, and then slowly but surely I earned my first Charvel.
Oh, yeah. Because when I came in here today, you had a new Charvel Jackson fucking shred machine that you had showed me that you were going to go buy on Craigslist the other day, and you got it.
The story of that Charvel is an amazing one. That's
the new one?
The new one. Because I think I told you a little bit about it, but I had to go all the way out to Palmdale to get it. I got it from a strange Frenchman out in Palmdale, and if anyone knows where Palmdale is, it's like in the high desert, on the edge of the high desert, I should say. And this dude, when I went in, he had like a samurai sword collection. He looked like a kickboxer. It was, we were out in the middle of nowhere. So
He's like a QVC.
Yeah, it was fairly
target demographic.
It was terrifying.
Cutlery corner.
It was actually a little terrifying in the house. But when he got comfortable with me, he showed me around, and he had just tons of shred guitars and like amps.
I've seen him on Craigslist. He's got a couple of those like M1 Bengal Tiger. George Lynch model.
Yeah, I guess he sells just tons and tons of stuff, and he's actually a really nice guy. There's really no reason to be afraid. You just get a little nervous when you see samurai swords and stripper shoes, and and like you just.
And there's no stripper.
Yeah, you just got a little uncomfortable.
There's just a bloody samurai sword next to the stripper shoes. Yeah. Sean, let me show you my guitar collection. Okay. Great.
But I don't. He has tons of these things in various states. And
what was the first Charvel that you got?
It was like this kind of like, I always described it as like bowling ball blue. You get a bowling ball, it's all sparkly.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Deep blue. It was gorgeous and had 2 humbuckers. It was a little different than this one. This is a single humbucker model, but it was 2 humbuckers, and it was great. It was like a dream, but my dad didn't get me an amp, so I had to play through this reel-to-reel in order to get like distortion. So I would drive the inputs on it, and it would distort, and that was my first amp. It was like, sounds like something out of the 20s or something, but my dad was in this kind of like, you need to earn it, boy. And guitars are a lot more expensive. It's not like nowadays where they're mass-produced and you can buy a Chinese guitar for $100. Basically, back then, even the worst guitar, like a Lotus or something like that, was a couple $100. And a couple $100 in the late '80s was that was a good amount of money.
Yeah,
so.
Totally. Were you taking lessons, or were you just like teaching yourself how to play? Or
I took. There were some kids, and we were around. There was a lot of guitar players where I was living, and the older kids would kind of like teach you stuff.
Sure.
So that's how we learned, and then eventually, after high school, I did go to music school for 3 semesters up in Berkeley and Boston. That's when I was playing jazz. So.
What were you playing in any bands early on? Like, did you have like any punk bands or anything like that?
No, I did, but it was junk. I can't say that I was on to anything. Like some people had really cool bands early on. I had really fun bands with friends, but if you went back and listened to the material, it would sound so misguided.
You guys weren't playing like all ages shows in DC or anything
no,
like that?
No. It's funny because Adam was around during that time playing those shows, and when I moved to Texas. I had a band that I played around with, but we were so strange when I listen back because we were totally isolated. There was no scene. It wasn't until I moved to Austin, before I moved to Boston, is where I started like getting involved, and there was a nice scene in Austin. And then when I went to Boston, I was full into jazz. So I really didn't start my music life until I got to LA. Before that, I was really just a guy learning and just, trying to get to the city where I wanted to start.
That's crazy, but that explains, it kind of explains how you ended up where you are today, because you weren't like from the get-go trying to like start bands and like do this stuff, but you knew how to play, or you learned to play. And so eventually people that need someone who can actually fucking play on their records or join the band and learn stuff, they call on basically like a session guy or like a hired gun, which is kind of like what you've kind of become. Yeah,
that's, in all truthfulness, I was originally wanting to be like a Bill Frisell kind of guy. I wanted to be a jazz guy and playing combos. Well, I was accidentally lured out to Los Angeles. My original intention was to go to New York. But when I came out here, there's just no scene for jazz at that time. It's kind of changed recently, but that's what forced me into becoming more of a session guy for TV and a composer. Really, I compose. I have like I have like 1,000 songs out there doing stuff in TV land, and that just came out of it was situational. And then I had that awakening in my mid-20s when I was invited into a band that I was like, oh wait, being in a band's really fun. And I was kind of invited into a scene where it made starting bands a lot easier because you knew people.
Sure.
And I kind of fell back into it. Now I'm very serious about playing with people and making art. But back then, I honestly, for the first 4 or 5 years I was here, I really could care less about being in a band. It's weird looking back at that, but I was happy to get stuff on television. That was my, and television music is really not that great. I don't know what I was doing, but
Well, I went through that same thing in the sense of like after working at a record label for 6 or 7, how many years, which at the time felt like a really long time, and now looking back on it is not that long of a time. But when you start when you're 18 and you end when you're 25 or whatever I was, it seems like a really long time. And I had to take like 5 years off of like not playing in any bands after that, because all I did was play in bands and work at a record label. So it's like I would go to work and do music for 8 hours at work and then go to band practice after, and it's just more music and more, and then go to a show afterwards. And after a while it's just like you drive yourself nuts just being around the same fucking thing constantly.
It's cool though that you got to kind of see how the business works, and especially from, obviously we're talking about Sub Pop, and it's from a more artistic side, a label that deals more in a boutique music. So it's cool that you got to see into that, because so many people that's a great mystery to them.
Sure.
And it's it's funny when you hear like their ideas of how they're going to make it, and you're like, man, that's just not how it works.
Well, that's kind of the point of this whole fucking show and this whole podcast is like, let's talk about like what actually, not that I've fucking made anything, but like let's talk about what works as far as like if you do want to get into music licensing or film or TV or whatever, like, and it always comes down to the same thing in any other job, which is just you just have to fucking work your ass off, and you have to like say yes to opportunities like you do, and you get to know people by saying yes. If you say no, if you isolate yourself, then you're fucked.
I would say that 75 to 80%, maybe even more, is social. It's whether or not people like you. It's
social, and yeah, exactly. It's social in and up to a point where it's like, yeah, if you know people, but like, can you actually do the fucking job, and can you like get along with people? Which that's not my strong point. But
that's the rest. That's the rest of the other.
Unless
20%.
I like you,
I find you.
If I don't like you, I'll never get along with you.
I mean, it's always whenever you're dealing with bands and you're dealing with people trying to get bands out there, you're dealing with type A personalities for the most part. So you're going to have to learn how to deal with that.
Right.
But
if you have like, and I think I don't know if you have a type A I don't even know what that means.
Well, I don't want to use those generic terms.
You're pretty like
I'm pretty easy to get along with until you push to a point. You know what I mean? Like I'll deal with so much, but I have this kind of like crime fighter thing that if I see injustice, I'm just not going to deal with it. And that was basically my downfall in some of the bands I've been in.
Right.
I don't like to be messed with, so.
Sure, well, nobody does, but and I generally like to mess with people, so it's hard for me to. But I can't be messed with either. So getting back into here, so then you build this studio at your house, and how do you get like your first job as like doing music or film for TV?
Well, I have been working all along, but see, when I first got to town, I met through some friends, some guys doing library music, and this was in the beginning of library music, or I shouldn't say the beginning. What's
library music?
Well, library music is where they can just pull cues from CDs for background music for regular television shows.
And it's public domain, and anyone can use it. Is that
no?
How it
It's not public domain. Okay. You have to fill out cue sheets, and you also have to pay licensing fees. But this is like, instead of having a composer for a TV show, let's say something like back then it would be shows like Current Affair, these little kind of news shows. They needed little bumpers and cues.
Gotcha.
And they would, instead of having a composer, they would just pull from libraries of music that's like, oh, we need a cue that sounds like rock and roll. Oh, we need a cue that sounds like hip hop. That's how it all started out. And I worked for guys that were doing that through, it was Sony BMG's library called Killer Tracks. I think it's since changed hands several times. But that's where I kind of got my start in the business and started to learn about the business. And I would just make cues for them. Basically, I would purge all my bad ideas. If I came up with some stupid riff, I'd be like, that'll be perfect. Go in there and we'll knock it out. So it was just making like Van Halen sounding rock songs all the way to like whatever was popular at the time. It was really a great way to practice being a session player. It was, that part of it was fun.
And you were doing this here out of their studio, or?
No, I first had a space. I first lived in my studio in a house where basically I just had a bed in the middle of my studio. And then as I got more money, I rented spaces, and I've had spaces all the way from Chatsworth to downtown Hollywood. I had one in Crossroads of the World, if you know where that is.
Sure.
I had a studio
there. That's
there.
where the Taschen offices were there for a while.
I had a studio there. I've had them everywhere. There used to be in LA before the great migration here. There was office space for days, and if you could pay $300 to $600, you had an office space in this town.
Right. So you would have a weird space like Crossroads of the World would be available to someone.
It was awesome, yeah. And those were places where they did like John Holmes films and stuff. It was really a really weird place.
Don't sit on the furniture.
Yeah.
If you're in the office there. My buddy, I ran into my buddy yesterday who just moved into one of those studio spaces that used to be the Beastie Boys.
Yeah,
Grand
over
Royal.
in Atwater.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been to that one. It's cool.
I was in TG one night, wasted, and these two guys were in there, and they were like, "Hey, we have a studio space." They knew a friend. It wasn't just like these two guys were picking me up, but they were like they knew a friend of mine, so they were like, come check out the studio space upstairs, and I'll let you know. I'm adjusting the mic here. If it sounds weird, I'm adjusting the mic. Sean's helping me adjust the mic because we are doing it in Sean's studio and not the normal place. But we went upstairs there, and I like laid down some guitar on some like weird hip hop track that they were working on. I don't even remember.
Did it still have the stage? I remember it had like a stage in there, and it
had like a half pipe in there.
Well,
at some point.
Things have changed.
Not anymore, but yeah. But my buddy John, he just moved in there yesterday. I saw him, and he's like renting out one of the studio spots in there.
Yeah, and I've met people that had some really cool studios from situations like that where you just knew the right person and they gave you a decent price, and next thing you know, you had a pretty awesome studio. And
it's crazy because they're basically writing music for like pop stars. Basically, they're submitting music to people like, I don't know if it's like Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, but like something like that. They're writing that kind of music in the studio to submit.
My wife and I played a showcase. We have a band called Lock and Key, and we did a BMI showcase a while back, and I met some girls from Nashville that were doing kind of a country duo. But anyways, they become Nashville writers, and we keep up through the Facebooks, and I saw that they got their big song. They got it to one of those big Nashville artists, and it got them a publishing deal. And it's like, wow, it still happens, Yeah. So.
It's crazy because it's just like when I'm like at band practice or whatever, it's like that's the furthest thing.
Yeah,
from my mind.
I don't know how to even write for those kind of artists, because I imagine it's all it seems like it's all catchphrase, hook, and sound design, which is I don't work in that, so I couldn't even tell you where to begin, other than I guess it exists, So.
Right. But let's break it down then, so because it's easy to talk to you because I know you so well and we've been doing all this shit together. But like, I want to break it down for people. So someone comes to you with a video game idea, and it's like So for instance, like it's a car racing game or whatever, and they say, "What, we need all the music for the game, or we need a certain piece of music for the title sequence, or do we need the sounds of the fucking tires squealing?" Or
well, for this particular game, I will be doing the sound design also. But yes, there's all kinds of little components, and we also have to make sure that a lot of the music is modular. And what I mean by that is that it can be cut and looped, and it can be used as stabs, like a hit. Like if you do a function in a game, it can also just pop up, and a little strike, a little part of the song will pop up. It's really quite complex. These guys are really, really smart. I'm by far the dumbest guy that's working with them. These developers are all from MIT, and our company that distributes us is out of San Francisco. So I'm dealing with really smart guy, and their problems are big. My problems are sort of big. So we talk about it. I talk to them a lot because I don't want to waste anybody's time with making stuff that doesn't work. So what we usually come up with is an idea that's going to an idea for a direction of what's going to work in the game, what style we want, and it's really fun. And you get the input of other people. That's one of the things I have to listen to people. And back in the past, I used to always think that I knew everything that was right. But it's funny when you listen to people; they actually have pretty good ideas. And it's just we have a big meeting about it, and then we start making music, or I start making the music, and usually I get pointed in the right direction, and I don't have to redo many things. On occasion, I miss the mark, but.
But to acquire these sort of jobs or gigs or whatever, this is all through word of mouth. This is you building on something that you started a long time ago by starting out getting like a little job here and there, like doing the cues for the what did you call it, the library music,
yeah.
And then meeting more people and constantly like kind of getting up to the point where someone will come directly, like, we need Sean Hoffman to make the fucking car song or whatever.
Yeah, it's one
car song.
The car song. It's one of those cases where I never suggest anyone to do this very often, but a long time ago, the main developer guy, who's a really great guy and also a great musician, he hit me up kind of like, hey, I got this early company. Can you make me a song for this little video game I'm doing? I will pay you when I get paid. Usually when I hear that, it's a big no.
Right.
But you know what? I did it. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And sure enough, he paid me like half a year later when he got paid. And some trust was built there, and ever since then we've built this relationship. But it all started through socially, through friends. I hate to say it. It wasn't like I entered my stuff and it's like, you, sir, you have the job. It's not like that. People just said, hey, my buddy Sean can do that stuff. That's how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like when someone comes to me and says like, hey, can you do a children's record? And I'm like,
sure.
I'm like, yes, I can, because I know Sean Hoffman. If I didn't know you, I'd be like, hold on, let me find out somebody that can do it with me, and I'll get back to you. But instead, I'm able to just say, yes, I can do that because I know this guy. You know,
I have no family connections in the biz or anything, so it goes to show that somebody that comes from an area like Air Force family has nothing to do with this business. You can find your way into it, but it's hard work, and you have to go to a lot of parties, and I still go to a lot of parties. It's funny, it's like that's how you meet people. That's I got my last I did a theme for George Takei's technology show, and it's all because I made friends with the guy at a party. So
I can't imagine what kind of, it was at George Takei's party.
No, it was Klyler from David Klyler from Volcano Suns. He's filming it. It was just one of those things where he kind of gave me a shot. Like, oh, you do this stuff, all right. And then next thing you know, I delivered it. It worked, and now you have a new client.
Well, I think that if we've learned anything today, that it's again, the point being is that all of these jobs or whatever are the same in the sense of you have to be good at what you're doing. You have to work hard at it. It's not easy. And then you also have to be open to opportunities that come along and say yes to some things that maybe you don't necessarily want to do.
Yes.
I feel like I'm doing this show for like high school kids because I've fucked up so many times.
Yeah.
I'm like doing this show. My mom is like a high school counselor. So now I feel like I'm turning into Barb Mayhew here. I'm doing this like public service to repent all of my sins of my early 20s.
Well, people often aren't very honest with how they got started. They like to make it sound cool, but really it just is a big part social. But it's best to try your best to be better than everyone else, because that helps too. So you really try to be good, because I've known some guys who were just connected dudes that would get a job and eventually they'd meet their match. They couldn't do it. They may have been the coolest guy in the world, but they just got into a position where like they didn't have the skills. And you do have to have skill. It's good to have both. But you can't be the weirdo that just hides out in his room and expect to work. You got to go out and you got to go to parties, which, isn't really asking that much. You just got to go out and press the flesh and, maybe know that the first couple Iron Maiden records had a different singer, just
exactly.
That stuff that's a little party fodder.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was reading I don't know why I was reading Pitchfork this morning, and this guy was talking about, there was an article written by this guy talking about going to the singer of LCD Sound System's new wine bar in Williamsburg.
I saw that he has a Macintosh amplifier in there. Like he has like this total audiophile system. A friend of mine that's her building that he built it in.
Well, I believe that. I mean, sure. The guy who wrote the article though talks about at one point that the dude from LCD Sound System, I can't remember the guy's name, James Murphy, that's his name, goes over and cranks up the music or whatever in the restaurant, like as they're kind of closing down or whatever. And the guy's trying to Shazam it on his phone, and he can't figure out what song it is. And Shazam, I don't know how Shazam can't figure it out, but he asks him, and it's like Zigzag Wanderer by Captain Beefheart is the song. And as I'm reading, I'm spitting out my fucking coffee because I'm just like, how the fuck are you writing about music in New York City and you don't know that? Like, that song to me is like DJ'd every single fucking place that I go to, but I don't, maybe that's just because I always DJ it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I guess it...
What were we talking about before then? I don't know.
It's funny that I actually saw an article about this particular restaurant. I think we were just talking about knowing your shit.
Oh, that's what it was.
Okay, so
how do you? Yeah, exactly.
I get where
you got to know
like,
your
basically,
shit.
this guy is writing for. Was it a guy or a girl? It was a guy.
It was a guy.
Yeah, he's writing for Pitchfork, which is a.
What does it matter if it's a girl?
It's a tastemaker, right?
Yeah. What would it matter if it was a girl?
It wouldn't matter. I'm just saying, just making sure. Like, are we picking on a guy or a girl here?
Got it.
But he's writing for this tastemaker publication or online, whatever the hell it is, and he doesn't know enough, you know. And you would expect.
Why do you admit it in the article? That's
I would never admit it. Like,
there
of course,
you go.
I knew that was Captain Beefheart.
Yeah,
I love his stuff. Only his early stuff.
Sure. I think he lived in Palmdale actually too.
Well, I guess what you're saying is that you want someone with skills and someone that has a massive knowledge, kind of like being a music supervisor. It's amazing when people are music supervisors and they don't know shit, and you're like, how could you not know shit? That's your gig. You should be obsessed with this. Like,
I think that's the point, is that whatever you do, whether you're like, you know, making fucking, you know, pastrami, or you're making fucking beats for hip hop or something, you the people that are successful at it are the people that are obsessed with it, whatever they're doing.
Well, that's the guy that's always, or the guy or girl who's going to be the legendary person, is the person that knows their stuff. So right. Yes, you get your opportunity, but you also should always be trying to get better. And if I was working for Pitchfork, I would be obsessed with learning, you know, music from the past, even going beyond early punk rock. You know, you'd get back to like to weird jazz, to whatever. You would just try to learn everything you can so that you always know what you're talking about.
Or know enough to not admit that you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and often that's one thing that I had to do recently in the past like 5 or 6 years, was to admit when I didn't know and just say, I don't know, please tell me about it. You might as well learn instead of going around being like an asshole.
So that's good. Final question I have for you then, getting back into the whole... Basically, what we're talking about here is home recording in a sense, because you're basically recording music out of your house, or your own studio that you built, as opposed to like renting out the Electric Ladyland to go do your shit or whatever. So for people that are trying to do home recording stuff, like what advice do you have as far as like what's like a piece of gear that somebody should have? Is there one piece of gear that you can kind of start out to do this sort of stuff, and then expanding on that question, what would you do once you do have a piece of music that you like, that you think could be in a TV show or a film or a video game? It's getting into a long question here, but
no, that's fine. First, the most important gear with digital recording, which I imagine most people are going to be doing, is converters. And don't mess around with converters. Get fancy converters. You can get by with cheap mics and even a marginal mic preamp, but converters are everything. And
what's a converter?
ADDA, audio to digital, digital to audio. It's a piece that converts analog sound into digital to go into the computer, and then it does the same. It also turns digital into an analog signal out of the computer. So you want that to be super strong, and that has to do, I'm not going to get too far into it, but it has to do with clocking, and that's clocking. A good clock and a nice converter is everything, and I'm serious. That is the most important part of digital recording.
See, I did not know that. So
that's basically, not to throw brands around, but I would at least get something like a Apogee to start with. I wouldn't do an Inbox, or even if they make those anymore, I wouldn't do any of the other ones. I would get something like an Apogee. It goes up from there. Buying an Apogee is like getting a BMW or something. You're getting a nice, you're getting a nice car, but there's all the way up to Maseratis and Lamborghinis as far as converters go. But that's like, you're competitive in the business if you get one of those converters.
Gotcha.
The second part of your question was, what to do if you have a good piece of music.
Right.
This is really tough.
So I'm glad you remembered.
Music supervisors are, they're like royalty here in Los Angeles, and they are super hard to contact through basic, like through email or anything. Forget about it. You're talking about like hundreds of thousands of people are writing these people. They do not answer it. I wish I had a good answer. I don't. And it would either be through social channels, or you'd make a clever YouTube video and put it up on YouTube. If the song's strong, it starts building a bunch of likes, some of them will come looking for you. Sadly, that's the way it is. Views and likes. If you don't know anybody, it's views and likes. If you do know somebody, that you can just hand it to them if it works. But it's hard to meet those supervisors. I hate to break it to folks, but it is.
Well, and if you want to know more about it, you can listen to, I think it's episode 8. I don't know. You look it up on Jedbanger's Ball. There's
one where you had the two girls on there. Didn't they get stoned or something? And like it got really funny. Yeah, I mean, like, there's someone working in the business. I didn't listen to that one. I need to check it out. I'd be curious to what she said.
It's Tiffany Anders, who's a music supervisor, and she says the same thing that you say pretty much, in that we kind of figure out on each one of these episodes is that it's not fucking easy. So
I think if you have an original band and you have strong material, the best way to advertise it, if you're not going out and playing the circuit, is through YouTube. Some people have made careers out of just making really catchy YouTube videos and good songs to go along with it, and people have gotten quote unquote famous that way. It's a great way to advertise. It's also, often you put something up there and it just goes out into the universe.
Your options are either you get famous off of it, no one sees it, or it's a horribly embarrassing thing that you're then cyberbullied for the rest of your life. Those are your three options.
Yeah, I mean, if it's real earnest, yeah, you could be cyberbullied.
All right, Sean, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. All right, that was Sean Hoffman. Thanks for listening. As always, we're brought to you by This Is Not a Pipe and Green Street, although today we were not recorded in our normal spot in beautiful mid-Wilshire, Los Angeles, California, but we're coming at you from the rolling hills of Echo Park, as my friend Chad Brown used to say. Sean was nice enough to record his own interview. We'll put a link up on the site for you to check out more of his stuff. But as always, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. This is Jedbanger's Ball, signing off.